No, just no reason. Let me fix that. Merci un peu pour brancher pour nous à ce ça nous a dit un programme sorti NTN à ce ça passé en cas constitutionnel et Jordia c'est vendredi 3 juillet l'année 2026. Peut-être qu'on a échangé, nous en session, ça nous a créé Sénat là, qui finit bien taillé. Ça, c'était la première session, c'est le premier jour Sénat là, qui finit bien taillé. Côté, c'est même Sénat là, tu as discuté plusieurs, enfin, en tout, c'était 10 différentes motions, à ce différents sujets qui ont concerné le gouvernement. C'est un sujet quand sa situation en changement climat, situation taxe qui le gouvernement a payé, différents gens business, les gens qui ont payé salaire, différents, ça nous a dit amnesty côté gouvernement qui a demandé pour tirer ces taxes là pour certains temps. Avec plusieurs autres différents, aussi côté gouvernement qui a essayé de bâtir, prêter l'argent, et bien pas prêter mais garantie en l'argent pour slash pas, ça c'est autorité la WAD Sainte-Lucie qui a essayé de bâtir en la WAD en sa place cul-de-sac puisque l'année chaille la crédit la panier assez les en question encore puisque l'année différents côté ces places cruise là l'année côté opération qu'a fait avec yo qu'a essayé regarder si yo ça bâti en l'autre place ça c'est en l'autre la WAD en cul-de-sac plusieurs différents sujets avec ces différents ça c'est Sénat là avec peut-être vous pouvez savoir qui Sénat là ni 3 membres opposition, 5 membres à ce façade gouvernement et des indépendants. C'est eux qui ont discuté ça qui a passé. Il a allé, il a créé anglais upper house. Ça veut dire Sénat là c'est membres qui pas électés. Il a choisi à sous façade d'opposition, il a choisi par chef façade d'opposition, à sous façade gouvernement, il choisit par ça c'est chef façade gouvernement, et en indépendance, même indépendance choisi par gouverneur général là, qui avec l'année aussi, l'année président. Président c'est sénateur Alvin Reynolds. Bon, ça, comme on dit, ça qui a fait là, c'est les émotions, et bien en loi, et bien en bill, nous a dit, les y passaient, ils discutaient en caille concite. Caille concite, c'est ça, nous a dit en anglais, lower house là. Il a discuté l'année 17 membres, chaque cas représenté en Powers constituency, nous a dit, côté il a représenté, avec il a venir ensemble pour passer loi, faire discussion, enfin tout pour conduire le pays. Avec après ça, n'importe ça il discuté, décision il point là, il faut passer pour dans ce Sénat là. Après Sénat là discuter, il dit il fait changement à tout ça qui passe, peut-être en les fait et ben ouais, n'importe quoi. Alors il a venir passer by Sénat là. Et si l'union les a vieux voyer pour corriger avec il a discuté. C'est ça qui c'est comme ça gouvernement qui a fonctionné. Et dernièrement, comme on dit, il a vieux passé et puis il a voyé le gouverneur général là qui a passé les signes, ça veut dire qu'il a venu en loi. Eh bien, discussion aujourd'hui comme ça qui a été fait là, c'est nous avons continué, ça c'est ça qui pas fini hier. Comme on a dit tout à l'heure, c'est motion, je discuter ces motions avec aujourd'hui Yo ka gade se différents ça nous a dit amendement et ben petit changement pour loi qui a fait. Ces changements yo ka gade fait changement c'est banking, ça fait banque. Yon yo qui est plea bargaining, ça c'est une situation loi payable by justice. Nous a dit income tax, ça c'est ça fait income tax automatic exchange of financial account information. Moi j'ai semaine passée premier ministre il a présenté oui premier ministre était bien. M'a dit fâché, mais il partait bien. Il partait. Moi, ça dit Shelton ça venir puisqu'il a aidé moi ici. Nous là aussi dit ça le St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment, Tourism Development Amendment, Electricity. Bon, moi j'ai posé à ce electricity. Shelton, ok, Shelton qu'a resté dehors toujours, mais l'électricité c'est une loi qui gouvernement pas en chaque temps j'ai décidé qu'il y aurait passé avec il a fait un chaque changement là ni loi électricité à présent à ce ça fait courant électrique mais ce que le gouvernement a essayé de faire c'est pour ouvrir teasing faire à de manière pour plus moun en droit en dédain pour les humains manière il y a ces compagnies électriques là yon qui ça produit électrique et tout bail comme ça mais vite mon Shelton bienvenue
comme ça mon comité Mike dans les mains président country actuellement.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel,
wisdom and understanding, we thine unworthy servants have gathered together in thy name to most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be for the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in the true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Good morning, Senators. Welcome back, and I trust you had a good, restful evening. Welcome back to the staff and members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Before we commence today, Senators, I wish to make a brief announcement, and that is to remind Senators about the use of cellular phones in the chamber. I would like to advise Senators that we should step outside of the chamber to answer phone calls, to make phone calls, and to listen to voice messages. And I trust that I will have the cooperation of all Senators in this matter. Thank you very much. Senators, when the Senate rose last evening, motions 9 and 10 were passed. Bills, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the first reading a bill shortly entitled Banking Amendment.
Banking Amendment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that this bill be presented for second reading at the next or subsequent sitting of the Senate.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Plea Bargaining.
Plea bargaining.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that this bill be presented for the second reading at the next or subsequent sitting of the Senate.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Income Tax Amendment Number 2.
Income Tax Amendment Number 2.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order Number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order Number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Income Tax Amendment Number 2. Madam President, every St. Lucian should have a fair opportunity to own a piece of fair Helen and to build a secure future for their family. This bill, Madam President, is therefore more than a tax amendment. It is a statement of this government's commitment to put people first, to listen to the realities facing ordinary citizens, and to act in ways that make opportunity more attainable. For the first time, Madam President, this measure allows first-time owners to claim a deduction of 50% of the interest paid on money borrowed to purchase land for residential purpose. A first-time landowner, for the purposes of this measure, is an individual who has not previously held a legal interest in residential land in St. Lucia. Madam President, we know that for many young people, working families, public officers, nurses, teachers, police officers, entrepreneurs, and returning nationals, the first and most difficult step toward home ownership is often acquiring land. By reducing the cost of borrowing, this government is helping families move from aspiration to ownership, from renting to building, and from uncertainty to stability. Madam President, last year we had a calypso which says, "My government working." And we can see by this amendment that my government is truly working for the people of St. Lucia. The benefits of this measure are both personal and national. It will help St. Lucians build personal wealth, encourage investment in assets that can appreciate over time, stimulate activity in the construction sector, and support broader social development across our communities. Most importantly, Madam President, it tells citizens that their government understands the pressure they face and is prepared to respond with practical relief. Yesterday, Madam President, we had the debate on the zero rating of construction materials, and there was discussion on the availability of credits and so on, and people having the ability to raise funding for the project. And here we're seeing, Madam President, an all-encompassing vision where the government is zero rating items on construction materials and at the same time granting a 50% waiver through this income tax amendment. Madam President, this legislative amendment also extends the deadline for companies to file their income tax returns from 3 months to up to 5 months after the end of the financial year. This change is practical, fair, and responsive. It gives companies additional time to gather supporting documents, resolve discrepancies, finalize their financial statements, and coordinate properly with their auditors. The Inland Revenue Department anticipates that this amendment will reduce late filings by providing a more realistic time frame for compliance. In doing so, Madam President, it will ease unnecessary pressure on businesses, improve the quality of tax filings, and strengthen the culture of voluntary compliance across the business sector. Madam President, this is what people-centered governance looks like. Firm in its commitment to national responsibility, but fair in its treatment of citizens and businesses. Madam President, taken together, these amendments reflect a caring government that is not content merely to collect revenue, but is determined to create conditions for dignity, ownership, compliance, and growth. We are supporting first-time landowners because we believe in the dreams of our people. We are easing filing requirements because we believe regulation must be realistic. We are advancing these measures because we believe that fiscal policy must serve people, strengthen families, support enterprise, and build a more resilient St. Lucia. I therefore commend the Income Tax Amendment Bill to this Honorable Senate and ask for its support in advancing a measure that is compassionate, responsible, and firmly rooted in the lived realities of the St. Lucian people. I thank you.
Senators, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment number 2 bill be read a second time. Senator Norbert?
I like the podium. Thanks. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I noticed that the bill has 3 substantive clauses. The tax deduction, as the leader of government business explained, for first-time landowners. I also want clarification on the definition for first-time landowners, whether if you inherit land, if you do not say have deed, whether that would disqualify you, or if it's land that you already purchased, and whether owning land overseas would disqualify you if you're going to get land in St. Lucia for the first time. Also, the 5-month extension for companies to file tax returns, and I will also comment on the reduction of the penalty fee from 10% to 6%, with power for the minister to change the interest rate by order. So the new section 59D, I also see here that the purchases of land must be no more than 22,000 square feet, and of course it must be for residential purposes, and it goes back to, is it May 2nd or June 2nd, 2026? It's a bill that will be retroactive in nature. Now, this is not the first time we've seen such bills being debated in the House. It's a bit concerning to me that the bills come to change or to be applied in the past. The taxpayers receive a 50% deduction on interest paid. 50% deduction on the interest. And that will be excluded from the normal 40,000 deduction cap in section 44(4)(a). That's a tax deduction. All right, so I support the bill in principle. We, the opposition, support helping young people, getting land, getting houses. And I remember an idea that came from the United Workers' Party, where they were exploring an arrangement to have government help guarantee mortgages for young people. So we definitely support this bill in principle. However, legislation, Madam President, should solve the problems and not create uncertainties, which is why I took my time to write down the questions that I have. And of course, I would listen carefully for the responses. I know we clap when we say that the government is working. We expect the government to work. But if we do not clap for the lights working or the AC working, it would not mean that the government isn't working. But by the applause, I think we are pleased that the government is doing some work for our young people. And how much work? Let's just dive deeper into that. The deduction is only on the interest, as I said earlier. But what percentage of the average land payment is actually interest? And please, Madam President, permit me to use a little analogy. Say you pay $1,000 a month as your monthly payment on your land. The interest would be about $150 for the interest. The government is giving a 50% deduction on that $150. So in reality, you only get an additional $75 of deductible income. Just about that. Has government calculated the average annual saving? What really are we giving to the people? How much are we really giving? A tax break on about $75 additional. And who actually benefits from this tax deductible? Are the young people who are earning below the taxable threshold kept out of this discussion? Is there something that we can do for them, as suggested by the idea brought forward by the United Workers' Party, to help all the young people and not just those who pay their income tax? How does the bill help lower income families? We have to ensure that our bills provide opportunities for every St. Lucian, regardless of their economic bracket. I know for sure the banks benefit, because the government is not lowering land prices. The government is not helping to reduce mortgage rates. The government is not giving a grant. The government is not working with young people to guarantee their mortgages. The government is simply allowing a deduction on interest that is already charged. So is this really assistance to young families, to young people? Or is it government subsidizing interest charged by the commercial banks? I see no cap on the deductible interest. So can someone claim this deduction indefinitely? The bill doesn't say that clearly. So an explanation for the response, I will listen carefully to fully understand what this bill is doing. And where did the 22,000 square feet come from? Did we do some research, economic analysis? Was it a recommendation from Inland Revenue? Or did we just choose the figure 22,000 square feet? I still wish that the government would go beyond just helping young people buy land and work with our young people to help them own a home, help them with construction. Because land without financing construction does not solve our housing problem. So I'm sure the members on this side would love to engage in discussions, to explore the ideas brought forth during the election campaign, to see how we can work with young people to guarantee their mortgages for land and house. About the date on this bill, May 2nd. The bill says it's registered from May 2nd, but Parliament is debating it now. So I'm asking, why was this measure announced in the budget? Was it something that we planned? Is it one of the promises? I know we like to say that the government has fulfilled all of the promises from 2021, which of course we have clarified as that not being the case. But it was this one of the promises. And what legal authority existed before Parliament, before today, for this bill? Just a few more questions. I see the senators taking notes of the questions. I appreciate that. In terms of the extension for the companies to pay their income tax, what evidence showed that the existing deadlines were impossible or challenging? Is it the failure to comply? How many companies actually requested an extension, and how many were penalized? Because if some have been penalized and the others are getting an extension, how is that fair? Was Inland Revenue consulted in this extension? Were the auditors consulted? And can Parliament see the data that came out of these consultations? Of course, we have to ensure that our ideals, we strive towards our ideals, excellence, justice, and equality for all companies, all individuals. But giving these companies longer filing periods mean that we have later assessments done and later tax collection. And I know we spoke about the urgency to collect the tax. We need the government needs the money now to do what it has to do. So we agreeing to collect this revenue a little later. Has the ministry estimated the impact on the cash flow? And is it something that we can afford to do at this time? Because on one hand, we're complaining that we need to come to Parliament and rush the bills through so we can collect the tax. But some of these bills are saying, okay, let's allow them to wait a little longer to pay the very tax that we are saying that we already need. And it was the same thing for the VAT that we discussed earlier in this sitting, which was yesterday. VAT not being paid on time, income tax now not being paid on time. Some of the bills are coming to the House a little late. Even reports, as we said yesterday, coming to the House a little late. And I remember Madam President asking me to point out anytime I realize that Parliament is not being given enough scrutiny in the bills. And I will be pointing these things out. Because I believe that what's coming out of the discussions, too many of the reports are late, and too many extensions are being granted to people who do not comply, businesses and people who do not comply to the laws that exist in our country. The minister may prescribe another rate by order. So we approve a deduction from 10% to 6%, but the minister can change this without Parliament debating on it in the future. That's correct from my understanding? A statutory order can be sent and the minister can change the rate. But if we agree and we are debating to take the rate down to 6%, why is Parliament allowing the minister to change the rate by simply passing a statutory order? That's another example of, I think, Parliament giving up its role in scrutinizing the executive, Madam President. The government is reducing penalties while constantly complaining about tax compliance. If compliance is poor, why are we weakening the deterrence? I don't find that the bill, Madam President, stresses enough parliamentary oversight and debate, and every time that comes up, as you asked me to from yesterday, I will point it out. I really think that we should reconsider just allowing the minister to change the rate through a statutory order. I believe Parliament is surrendering control over tax penalties, and elected legislators and of course the upper house must debate changes to tax sanctions. It cannot be left up to the whims and fancies of whoever that new minister may be. We can never tell, so we must always plan for the future, for changes in Parliament. Tax penalties affect government revenue, Madam President. It affects business behavior, compliance, fairness, and those matters, and those items, they matter to Parliament. We must supervise them. So why are we delegating these responsibilities? I believe I already asked the question of the analysis of revenue that would be foregone. How much revenue will be lost? How much additional compliance is expected? And has Treasury modeled all of this? So in closing, I just want to say that tax legislation must be precise, it must be transparent, it must be evidence-based, and always subject to parliamentary scrutiny. Where government seeks to alter taxpayers' obligations or reduce penalties, Parliament deserves more than just assurances. We deserve data, and Parliament always deserves to be included in the process of governing this country. We have a very important role to play, not just as legislators, but also to advocate, to scrutinize, and to educate the people of St. Lucia in a way that they will understand exactly what's going on. Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you very much, Senators. I look forward to the responses from the government side.
Senator Preble.
Good morning, Madam President. Welcome to the second round after the lengthy session we had yesterday. Madam President, my comments on this bill are would be very narrow. I'll simply focus on the first part, and really and truly is to say that I would not ever want to stand in the way of efforts by the government of St. Lucia to make it easier for St. Lucians to earn or own a piece of property. Owning land is owning wealth, and wealth can always be leveraged for income purposes generation down the road. So I would never stand in the way of that. So in addition to what my colleague would have pointed out, I just quickly did a back of the hand type of calculation so that the public listening gets a sense as to what the amendment with respect to the insertion of clause 59, the new clause 59D, what it would really mean in real terms. And perhaps that could help the young person in the public understand what it is that they stand to benefit from in this bill, so they could assess what it is that the government is proposing. So for instance, Madam President, just a simple scenario. If we were to consider, and given that the upper limit on which land that benefit could be claimed, that is the 50% one-time deduction, because it says in the first year. When I read the bill, I was trying to ensure if it was continuing or in the first year, and I think Senator Norbert had asked the question, but when I looked at it carefully, it said 50% deduction in respect of any amount paid during the year of income by way of interest borrowed to purchase. Actually, I thought it was the first year. Well, no, first-time landowner, but the interest is in perpetuity until the loan amount is paid. So that is my interpretation of it. I was actually looking at the word first. I thought it was a one-time payment. So I think, Madam President, just to give someone a sense as to what it means, if you were to buy land, and generally when we buy land in the order of about 6,000 square feet. The average householder, first-time person buying land, is about 6,000 square feet of land. It goes up to 22. And if you were to buy land 6,000 square feet, and if you were to pay, let us say, $15 a square foot, just as an example, what we're looking at, and if interest rate was, say, 8%, so in that first year, you would be able to claim a tax deduction of about $3,600, a tax deduction. So I think that is a good step, a step in the right direction. And of course, if you were to buy land above 6,000 up to 22,000, which is the maximum, assuming 8% interest, $15 a square foot of land, you would be in the position to claim about $13,200 payment on the first, deductible, that is. You're able to claim as a deduction against your taxes up to $13,200. I think that is significant. I think that this amendment provides an incentive for a first-time landowner to seek to own some wealth in St. Lucia. What is important also to note is that while this provides that vehicle, some of the challenges we face with land acquisition in St. Lucia by a young person is generally not having the means on the front end to actually acquire the land. So this initiative, very good, but it already presupposes you're able to buy the land. But where we find most young persons having the challenge is having the collateral to go to the bank to actually get that loan. So, Madam President, what I look forward to going forward is from the government some form of initiative which seeks to make that aspect of the land acquisition even easier, so that when the young person is able to acquire that 6,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet, I think we generally advocate, and Brother Ignatius, Senator Jean would perhaps, his familiarity with the DCA would probably provide us with some guidance. We generally do not encourage acquisition below, I think, about 6,000 square feet of land, a proper 5,000 square feet of land.
Point of view.
So if we were to do that, so anything that makes it more possible for the young intended
Senator
person.
Yes. I rise on a point of elucidation, Madam President. Do you
Senator Preville, elucidation, are you yielding to your colleague?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, on the same point of the 6,000, could you just explore for us if your parent leaves you 1 acre and they're about to hand it over to you for the first time? That's about 44,000 square feet. Do you have to subdivide it into the 22? What do you think a young person like that would do in that?
Senator, elucidation is a point that he has made you want him to clarify. That's what it means to elucidate.
Yes. So he said 6,000 and he said that's the typical amount. So I'm asking if your parent is leaving you 44,000, that's an acre.
No, but based on what he said, you ask him to explain something. We're asking him, supposing that is not what he said.
So he said 6, right?
Right, so you're bringing him somewhere else, but you just ask him simply to explain something he has said that you have misunderstood.
No, I didn't misunderstand it, Madam President.
So what is your point of elucidation exactly?
So he said the average is from 6. The maximum is 22, right? And he said that's fine. So I'm asking him, what about 1 acre that a child inherits?
But you're presupposing that's not elucidation. Senator, please take your seat and allow your colleague to continue.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, Madam President. The substance of my contribution to the bill is to say, I believe this is a good initiative, but also to point out that it comes on the assumption that you have already or you are able to acquire the land. And what we would love to see the government do as we go forward, perhaps in the future, are initiatives that assist a young person with the capacity to actually acquire the land. So having acquired, and we encourage that, you then have this additional benefit on the back end where you're able to claim that deduction in your taxes for the ownership of that land by way of the deductions for your taxes in the future. I think if we have the combination of the two, it will make it much more possible for us achieving the goal that I believe the government has set itself through this piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Madam President.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of, I'm looking for the physical copy, but I not remember, I don't have one. Rise in support of the bill, and with your leave, I'd like to perhaps contrast it with the VAT measures that we looked at yesterday, just to make the point that I think this is a more targeted, a more defined, and therefore, in my mind, a better piece of legislation than what we were dealing with yesterday. The aim is quite clear, and I thank my colleague, Senator Preville, for doing the math and saving me from embarrassing myself with showing off how bad I am at math. But it shows that there's a clear, defined benefit open to persons who wish to take advantage of this piece of legislation. In addition to what Senator Preville was indicating, I know some of the banks, and I'm not sure if they're still continuing it, used to have homeowner plans for young persons, which allowed you to invest a certain amount of money every year, which is also tax-free, to help you develop that collateral to purchase your first piece of land. I'm not sure whether the banks still maintain those for their own commercial reasons, but I believe the legislation is still in place which supports it. And so therefore, this is clearly part of a targeted, as I said, approach to encouraging young persons to acquire land, and I very much support it because the earlier you can get on the property rung, the easier it is for you going forward. It allows you to do several things, and home ownership is just part of it, but the fact that you own a piece of land in St. Lucia is an investment that you can use for numerous other things. You can go into business, you can use it for further education, you can use it for home ownership. But again, as I said, that's sort of the foundation, and I very much applaud the government for taking this initiative. I also support the other aspects of the bill, which look at extending the time for filing returns for businesses. You find oftentimes, through no fault of the business, in fact, that especially when persons have the year end at December 31st, they run into the crunch, or even sort of March 31st, they run into the crunch of not having sufficient accounting facilities available to them to put in their returns on time, and so therefore they're often approaching the IRD to look for extensions, and that's something that's granted on discretion, and through no fault again of the business place, they may end up in a situation where they're having to pay penalties, etc. So I think it's a good, again, recognition of an issue and an approach to resolve it. And I think the business community as a whole will applaud this extension. And then finally, I look at I look at the change in the rate of interest. I know yesterday we raised the issue, a full amnesty versus changing the rate to encourage encourage compliance while still achieving the government's revenue aims. I'm not sure exactly why 6% as opposed to 10 was used, but again, and perhaps as part of the presentation, a little bit more background could be given as to the rationale for this particular figure. But again, I applaud the government for trying to address the situation and to improve it, rather than just going the full amnesty way. One other thing that I would like to, I have requested it in the past, and I just want to repeat my request. When we are making these tax measures, perhaps again, some background information as to the expected impact in terms of, one, the revenue foregone, but then the benefits that are likely to accrue. If we can have that information to help us make a more fully informed decision, because I'm supporting this partly out of emotion rather than fact. And I would like to be in a position where I know that I'm supporting something like this, a revenue measure, fully on the basis of facts that have been presented to me. I can look at the black and white figures and decide that I'm supporting this because I can see the benefit in terms of actual dollars and cents. But that being said, I support this initiative, and I commend the government for taking this targeted approach to using the tax to improve and benefit the citizens. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Poyot.
Yes, Madam President, I rise in support of the amendment, the income tax amendment, to what we call in colloquial language is the squeeze, and then to create incentives for our young people in particular, and others who are a little older and may have not gotten the opportunity, or they did not have the capacity to purchase a piece of Fair Helen. Madam President, St. Lucia is rapidly growing to become a gem of the Caribbean. I did not name the country. It has always been called Helen of the West, and we were told that it's the most beautiful. I have found myself in a number of arguments in the region where we compete among other countries to decide on which country is the most beautiful or the best. So I will stand my grounds for St. Lucia. So if we have this gem called St. Lucia, Helen of the West, and they said that's the only country in the world that is named after a woman. I don't know if you're fully aware, Madam President, but something, whoever named it once, we want St. Lucians and as many people as possible to have a piece of that gem. And the government of St. Lucia is creating an opportunity or exploring possibilities to encourage our young people and others who have not secured that to earn a little piece of that gem. And I applaud the government for this initiative. And Madam President, one of my biggest fears is that because St. Lucia is becoming a country where a lot of people want to reside, I'm afraid that people externally will come and buy the best lands in St. Lucia. And our very natives, the persons who are born here, may not be able to afford to own a piece. And if we go back to our history, we will recall during the time of slavery, when the slaves were freed, they had to retreat to the mountains and live in the hills, Madam President. And therefore they got the worst piece of land, and persons who could afford got the best piece of land. So now is the time for our young people, Madam President, to secure a very good piece of their own country. And the government is providing a tax relief on the interest that they would have to own in the tax return to pay or to contribute. And this is a sacrifice the government is making by foregoing possibilities of revenue to allow persons to own a piece of the country. Madam President, we have to share our experiences with especially our young people. And it takes me back to memory lane, Madam President, where 42 years ago, I decided that I need to have a piece of St. Lucia that's on my name. There was family land, Madam President, and you know there is always issues around family land. There is always issue, the Calypso say don't build on family land because it's not on your name, you have to wait, and all kind of dispute over family land. So I decided I need to have a piece that's called mine. And if I had gotten that support, it would have gone a long way in helping me defray some taxes I would have to pay or own too. However, Senator Norbert asked a question about donation, that if he is given a piece of land or some inherited a piece of land, whether he would benefit from that legislation. But Madam President, how can you get relief on a gift? It's a gift. We are talking about property that you purchase. It's already yours. You don't have to pay interest on something that's already yours. So this question of whether you will be benefiting from a donation, it's already your property. You already have a piece. Whoever left it for you, say praise the Lord.
Senator
Not everybody will be happy or fortunate to get that gift.
Senator Noban, you're rising on.
Yeah, point of order. The member is misleading the House based on what I said. I ask if you have your parent wants to give you a piece of land, 1 acre, but you have to take money to subdivide it. Like you have to take a loan to get the land. 1 acre, but you have to take a loan to get it. Would that apply to you if you're getting 1 acre of land and you have to take a loan to get the land, to buy the land?
Senator Poyo?
That's how it works in the countryside.
Yeah, the English language is not our native language, so I don't always like to battle with it, Madam President. But I understand that the land is yours. They have given you the land. Whether you subdivide or whatever, you are not going to purchase that piece of land. And if you are not purchasing the land, you cannot accrue interest on something that you did not purchase. So that little ramification or the little expenses you have, to me, I don't see that factored in buying a piece of land. So I take it straight from, you want to buy a piece of land, the bank asks you to pay interest, whether it's 5 years or 20 years, whatever you have to pay the land, you would pay some interest, and government is saying they are going to forego 50% of that interest, which will go towards your income tax return, that you have to enter that and say, well, I am not paying tax on that amount. I take it as very simple this way, Madam President. We also have I mentioned the issue of persons, if they do not acquire a piece of St. Lucia now, it may be too late for some of them later. It will be very expensive. You have celebrities and all kinds of persons who come to buy land, and as a result the price of land will just skyrocket, and our own people cannot buy the land. or they will have to go into the mountains and start building around Monjimi and I don't know, top of the pitons, and they have no electricity, no water, no telephone, nothing there, Madam President. Is that what we want for our people? And I applaud the government for having the foresight, having the vision to encourage our young people to secure a piece of St. Lucia. Now, Madam President, I want to speak briefly on the extension to pay income tax. Now, we know some people are saying why people are not complying and whatever. The government has realized that there is a problem in people filing their income tax return on time and so on. And I find, to be honest, this government has been over generous. But it is because of the compassion, the care for people, the hardships that some people go through, the red tapes and everything involved, and there will be delays, and some people don't have the capacity to meet some of the deadlines. And therefore, the government has seen the need to accommodate these persons by extending the time so that they can file their return. There is no harm in exploring new ways of solving a problem. And we cannot kill the initiative before it starts. We cannot say it will not work. Let us try to see. And if it doesn't work, we'll try another one. But we keep looking for answers to our problems. And we said, oh, people have to comply, and they must comply. Okay, they do not comply. We take them to court, and some of them end up at Borderley. And for those who have not been visiting there or have interest in what's happening there, it's not a nice place to be. And it is an expensive venture for the government in terms of taxpayers' money. So the more we can explore to keep people out of that place is better for the taxpayers, better for the person, so that we can have a country where everybody lives in a happy environment. I heard the Prime Minister of Barbados said how she is not interested in putting people in jail. She's more interested in earning money. Because every time, when we administer justice, it's a very expensive exercise. And sometimes we don't even get justice after going through. Get a lawyer, go to court every day and everything, and sometimes at the end of the day, you don't see the result. So if we can prevent, rather than looking for the cure, let us prevent things from happening. Let's prevent crime. Let's do what we can, as much as we can. Because putting people behind bars, and when I walk in this institution and I see so many young men, especially young men, Madam President, so we need to ensure that when we administer legislation, we look at the consequences. We said, okay, people are not complying, they are not paying their taxes, we'll take them to court, and if they cannot, the court rules against them, then we send them to jail. Just think of the consequence, Madam President, of that exercise. And I would go the way of bending a little and see if we can get results. We are encouraging the business places to comply. We are encouraging them to secure that opportunity and work with the government to see if government can collect the necessary revenue that is needed for us to keep this country going. So we don't have to borrow. If we are collecting the taxes that's owed, we don't have to go and borrow. But we have to keep the country going. We have to keep the people alive. We need education, we need health, we need roads, we need proper water, we need technology, we need security. Just name it, Madam President. So, Madam President, I do support this amendment so that we assess, and as was stated earlier, the more data we have, the more informed we can be in making decisions. So I have no objection in trying to get as much information to see how effective how impactful these legislations are after they are implemented. So, Madam President, I do support the motion, the bill.
Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, this is no easy feat. There is no small solution to the big problem which confronts us in this country of inadequate housing for the citizens of St. Lucia. Madam President, having been in politics, I've come to live people's lives. I've come to understand how people live on a daily basis. I've come to understand the housing need firsthand of our citizens in the country. Madam President, you drive through St. Lucia and you see many dilapidated structures, or you see structures where people have started them and they are in progress, and they are building out of pocket, or they are doing a coup de main to try to get the housing situation abated and try to provide housing for themselves. And then you've got that when they would have completed the house or the project, then it was built on family land. And then they're finding out that it is impossible for them to mortgage or to sell or to use that property for investment. So, Madam President, what we do have before us is a very complex situation that will require more than this amendment to solve. And, you know, one of my disappointments in this administration is that they have not been able to present a coherent plan when it comes to housing. In fact, I would love to see a status report from the Ministry of Housing on where the country is at. I noticed that the Housing Ministry had a new office on the Chaussee Road, and all that is well and good.
Senator Fede, I'm sorry to stop you here.
Yeah.
I do not want you going off on a tangent this time.
A tangent?
Speak to the bill, income tax amendment as it pertains to purchasing of property of land. You're going already about housing and so on.
Why do people buy land?
Senator Fede,
yeah.
Do not talk back at me. Okay? You speak to the bill.
Madam President, with all due respect, it is my understanding that if we are going to come to the Parliament for a measure to incentivize people to buy residential land, then I think the ultimate is actually to build a house. Unless we're talking about agricultural land. Right? But it is my understanding of the bill, or the amendment before us, and based on all the discussions I've seen from the other side, that this is geared at ultimately trying to help people to own a home, own a piece of St. Lucia. So unless I am mistaken, please guide me. But Madam President, I continue. You see, the issues that we face are deep, complex issues around this matter. Madam President, many people complain about the onerous interest rates at banks, for example, which is a major impediment in them obtaining or being able to obtain the land. Many people, Madam President, don't earn enough money to qualify for the loan. Their own personal circumstances, when they look at the income to debt ratio, disqualifies them from even qualifying for a loan to begin with. So when I say to you, Madam President, that it will require more than this to solve the problem that we face in this country of a lack of land ownership, a lack of people owning their own property. It goes deeper than this amendment to amend the income tax to cause people to better afford it. Anything that is going to go in that direction, the United Workers' Party, we support. But I don't believe this measure by itself is going to work. So we also see, Madam President, I mean, if we look at, just as an example, the Bank of St. Lucia, Senator Jha yesterday shared a chart where Bank of St. Lucia was one of the issuers of corporate paper, and they are looking to buy financing for 3%. That's the bank looking to buy this corporate bond from investors at a 3% rate. So if the bank is buying it at 3%, just imagine how much the bank is going to sell back the money for in the form of a loan. So we see, Madam President, clear evidence that the banking sector, the interest rates are quite onerous for a lot of people. And this is an indication that it is going to go at least above 5-6% when people are trying to unloan that money. Madam President, the Jamaica Housing Trust have a very interesting model. And if you look at one of their reports online, you would see that most of their loans that they give to starter homes in Jamaica, or first-time property owners, the interest rates, it ranges from 0 to 5%. Very attractive interest rate. From 0, depending on how much you earn, 0% interest. This is what we're talking about. So they have had a comprehensive plan, and it is going to be very interesting for the government to study what they do in Jamaica, because since 1976, they have built some 60-something thousand homes, and 60-something thousand families since 1976 have been able, Madam President, to own their property through the Jamaica Housing Trust, for example. Now, I don't know what we have done here in the Ministry of Housing. I don't know how much land and house packages we've been able to get people to get. Madam President, the Economic and Social Review is also instructive on this matter. And what it is that the Economic and Social Review tells us this about liquidity. It says liquidity in banks are soaring, it's increasing. But guess what's happening to lending and credit to consumers? It's actually declining. So the banks are tight-fisted with monies for reasons that they can explain. But we see, Madam President, in the Economic and Social Review that a chronic problem we have had is that the liquidity problem in the banks, it's good. The banks are flush with cash, but they're not lending those monies. So we have a lending problem, and there are several issues that surround the lending problem that we have in the country. So there's a problem of people accessing credit from our lending institutions, Madam President. And then we have, just yesterday we had a debate, and I was saying to the senators opposite that on page 28 of the Economic and Social Review, the review quite rightly said that lending for residential property is actually down. Yeah, it says the wording, the exact wording suggests that lending for residential property dipped in the year 2025. So we've seen declines there in the government's own account of how consumer loans are performing in the country. And this is, of course, the Ministry of Finance doing an assessment across multiple banks in the country to see what has happened for that year. Madam President, I do have some concerns about promises made by this administration in light of income tax. Because, Madam President, St. Lucians would remember very well back in 2021, this government promised certain amendments to the Income Tax Act. And they promised, for example, that in 100 days that they will pay tax refunds owed to St. Lucians. I would like a status report on how many St. Lucians since 2021 have received those promised tax returns below $5,000. It was 100 days that the Labour Party said that they were going to do it in the 2021 election campaign. But famously, they also promised via the Income Tax Act that anyone that is making $4,000 a month, that they were going to not have to pay tax. Madam President, I have waited. It's been several years now. We've had a whole election that has happened since 2021, and nada from the Labour Party as it relates to the promise to the people that they are going to pay no tax if they are above, if they are making 4,000 or lower. Why is that important? That is important, Madam President, because it would help individuals.
Senator Jean.
Madam President, on a point of order, Senator Fede is misleading the House. Senator Fede needs to state where that promise of a $4,000 earner would not be paying tax.
Senator Fede.
Thank you very much, Madam President. If the senator would like to forget the promise, then I understand. But the promise was made in the 2021 election. I have where? The leader, the then leader of the opposition, the leader of the Labour Party, the now Prime Minister, promised the people of St. Lucia that he would read the manifesto of 2021. Read the manifesto of 2021. I mean, I can't believe this. Wow. So, Madam President.
Senators, this is not a campaign space. Let us please stick to the bill at hand. That goes to both sides of the House. There are places where these things can be addressed. We are speaking to the bill. Proceed.
So, Madam President, if individuals were given the promise, people who are making $4,000, who were promised that they wouldn't have to pay taxes, income tax, it would mean, Madam President, that they would be in a better position to afford land and afford the interest at the bank. But instead of having to pay the interest, they have to endure a failed promise from the Labour Party administration. So, 4,000 threshold, yes, we are here today, Madam President. This is the Income Tax Act. And this is exactly where you address promises like those. The Senate can simply decide to vote that they are going to amend the Income Tax Act today so that they can keep the promise of the St. Lucia Labour Party administration so that the people of St. Lucia will be in a better position to buy land. So these token amendments here and there to always try to make people feel like you're doing them a favor, when really, if you keep your promise, you wouldn't have to do this. Keep your promise and give the people the tax-free income tax legislation that you said if they are making 4,000 or below. And that is the promise of the St. Lucia Labour Party back in the 2021 election. I remember very clearly the Prime Minister sat in a car and there were ads made of him saying to the people of St. Lucia, you make 4,000 a month, you wouldn't have to pay taxes. That is clear, right? So several years have passed and we haven't seen this happen. But we have high interest rates in the banks. We have a liquidity in the bank. And we have a credit situation where people are having difficulty in obtaining financing from banks based on the economic and social review. The lending is actually down. The own phraseology in the language suggests that the lending specifically for residential homes, when we look in the last 12 months, it has actually dipped, says the Ministry of Finance. So, Madam President, there is no easy solution to this. and no small policy prescription is going to address this rather complex matter. It deserves, Madam President, a comprehensive plan to address the housing shortfall which we face in this country. And first, I think the first thing is the government should keep its promise. Thank you.
Senator Jean, Ignatius Jean.
Madam President, thank you. I rise to support this very small but very significant and impacting piece of legislation, this amendment to the Income Tax Act. And I think there are other senators before me have shown how impactful it is and useful it is for particularly the younger generation who seek to acquire land for housing. So this is most commendable, and it shows that the government is responding to a lot of the challenges that we face. We listen to the people. We also listen to the people because the finance minister understands the challenges of the private sector. And there must be some reason why people are having the delays, and of course with timing differences when people are filing their taxes to get their accounting firms and so on to do their taxes for them. They are not able to file on time, so they have been given extra time. And even the interest rate, I rather suspect, because the statutory interest is at 6% per annum, which the state would be paying. I think they again have given a little soulagement by reducing it from 10% to 6%. But I've you know, the other senators and Senator Preville had some pertinent points that he made, which I think ought to be considered. But he is supportive of this. But you would have thought that his senior on the team, who has been in the parliament, comes pretending to be on a political platform and says that the government does not have a comprehensive plan or a coherent plan for housing. And he admits it is no easy feat. But one would want to ask, what did he do, or his administration do, during their 6 years in office? One might say it is because of COVID that not much was achieved. But the point is, if you go to Barbono, if you take a walk with Senator Preville to Barbono, you will see the expansion that is taking place in Barbono by the housing, the National Housing Corporation. And that is well documented. It was well in the media, the Talvan Estate. And there are several other development areas that they have already earmarked, and they have done surveys, etc. I was in a position as chairman of the DCA to know where a lot of these things are taking place. Wow. The next one that I will tell you about, which was a project that again you all made another fiasco of at Shock, because I was then the minister when we broke ground to do that housing development at Shock Estate, which was stopped when your other administration had taken it over. But that's for another show. But the point is that it is the Labour Party that has always advanced the cause for people of owning land in St. Lucia. And I have said it here before, the Land Reform Commission by the Labour Party of 1979 to 82 empowered St. Lucians with land for agriculture and for housing. You go and check the records, it's there for all to see. And when Sir John got into office in 1982, he continued with the program. Listen, he continued. And the USAID gave support to start the land registration and titling project. That is the work of the Labour Party. And then we get, in more recent time, PROUD, the Program for the Regularization of Unplanned Development. That is the work of the Labour Party, where people were occupying lands of the state. They were given lands, they were sold the lands, they got title for them, dependent on how long they occupied it. The more recent version of that was the land for people who had occupied those lands for over 30 years were getting it for free. Title. The government, and we came here recently to pass that bill, to move PROUD from just being a program to have a statutory body that will be managing those lands. Right? Comprehensive planning. It's visioning. So don't come here. No, don't come and talk about how many houses that were built. Look, you know the number of people, but I'm just showing you under the PROUD how many people who were occupying state lands, and today they have title. They can go to a bank. They can go to the bank to secure loans for building houses, for sending their children to universities because they have a deed of sale and they can borrow based on that. It has value. That's how we empower people, my friend. And then invest in Lucia. Has as much land doing the similar thing. And under the new PROUD program, you will see all of those lands that are vested with, some of those lands that are vested with Invest in Lucia, and other Crown lands will be under this new program of the PROUD program, which is made a statutory body to manage those lands, to empower more people. So do not come here with things that you don't know about comprehensive planning. This is a very significant piece of legislation, a significant amendment to give and to empower young people in accessing land and getting title, and to get them to invest in their country. That is what is going on. So you also said about all the properties that you see falling apart. And you see, it is the way the government thinks of assisting people. There are many people who may have inherited a home from their parents. And there are people who have worked all their lives. They have a property. It is a wooden property or even a concrete property. And it's falling apart. The government has seen the need to give assistance to people who don't have the means to do that. That's why there is the housing assistance program. So you wouldn't see high-rise buildings in certain places, but we have to help to make people comfortable and to give them some dignity. This is what this Labour Party government is about, and that is why there's a housing assistance program. But you don't see that. So, Madam President, I just wanted to clarify these few points and to support the amendment of the bill. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, fellow senators, for your contribution to the debate on the Income Tax Amendment Act. Madam President, I listened carefully. I thought that this morning we would be out of here early, but this, to my mind, what is a very straightforward and beneficial amendment to legislation I didn't expect it to generate such debate. Madam President, in the legislation on this amendment, it states clearly what the income tax, the definition of a landowner. It clearly is a first-time landowner, so I don't understand the question that is being posed to the Leader of Government Business. It says in this section, first-time landowner means an individual who has never previously held a legal interest, whether solely or jointly, in residential land in St. Lucia, and acquires a parcel of land in St. Lucia intended to be used for residential purposes. I cannot get anything else out of the definition. And I'm sure the legal minds in this room would tell us that whatever is in the definition, that's what's in the definition. We cannot pull anything out of that definition. Also, Madam President, we see that the deduction is 50% of the interest that is being paid on the loan to acquire that property. Who benefits? Every first-time landowner. Madam President, we are looking for a comprehensive plan. Madam President, every single thing that the government has done adds into. We are not doing things in isolation. Madam President, young people have an opportunity that they have never had before to go to the Youth Economy Agency. They have a good business idea that they can now turn into entrepreneurship. They can start their own business if they have a good business idea through a $5,000 grant. They get mentorship, they get training, so they have a foundation. But Madam President, the government cannot do it all. Families have to come around and help. Other people, so it's all-encompassing, comprehensive. Madam President, even before that, there are scholarships available to young people. There's assistance, and if we want to start and look at the comprehensive plan, we can take it from the maternal child health program that the government gives pregnant mothers opportunity for ultrasounds and blood tests. So if we want to look at comprehensive development of youth to be able to acquire that property, we can start it from childbirth. That is what comprehensive means. That is what a government that looks after its people from birth right through. Madam President, the government has also created an avenue through the St. Lucia Development Bank to provide low-interest loans to first-time owners, to civil servants, and to other people. We have come here.
What's the interest rate?
Madam President, the government provides $1,000 towards legal fees for first-time mortgages. We forget and we disconnect what we do every time we come here, as if everything we do does not link to the other. Senator Dominic Fede wants to go to Jamaica and look for comprehensive plan. But we have right here in St. Lucia a comprehensive plan for the people of St. Lucia. And when you look at it in every single sector, there is a comprehensive plan. Madam President, in this current legislation that we're dealing with, it says that that interest allowance or that interest, the deduction, does not include the overall $40,000 cap. So that is in addition to the $40,000 cap that we have in our Income Tax Act. So it means that the taxable income or the tax that we pay is going to be much less because it will be above the $40,000. All of that is significant. So, Madam President, we have a government that listens. We have a government that cares. But more importantly, we have a government that acts. based on what it has heard from the people. Yesterday we dealt with a resolution on the payment of interest and penalties, and we were saying for the VAT, and we were saying, oh, that favors business and so on and this and that. Look again, we come in. Comprehensive plan. A government realizes that within 3 months, it is difficult. 3 months after the end of a financial year, it is difficult to complete financial statements, have them audited and everything in time for them to file their taxes. And so they have increased it to 5 months. Madam President, isn't that a government that listens? We heard before. We were told that I don't listen. I don't listen. That's what we were told. That's what the people of St. Lucia heard. That was told to the people of St. Lucia. I don't listen. I make them break. That's what we heard. But here we're seeing that through consultations with people, with businesses, with first-time landowners or people who are contemplating purchasing land and so on, the government is making changes to their policy at their expense because there are revenues forgone as a result of these initiatives. But the government is bold enough to put these new initiatives in place in order for people, our St. Lucians here, to be able to live properly in our country. Madam President, if you go overseas to Barbados there, not many Barbadians can buy a piece of land now. They cannot buy a piece of land. But here, the government is making it possible for owners. And we're saying young people, but there are some people who reach 50 years already and they still don't have a piece of land. So it's not just for young people. There are people who are still squeezing. This is not just an initiative for young people, it's for everybody. There are some people who still there at their parents' home or renting. So now there is an opportunity. Are we saying that this is not a good initiative for the people of St. Lucia? Is that what we're saying? I heard Senator Prevail unequivocally say he supports the initiative. He has some issues with it, but he supports it. Now that's maturity, Madam President. That's what we have to come and do. Don't come and sing to the gallery. The gallery has already made their decision. But if the gallery continues to hear the same old rhetoric, the gallery will not change. Makai Bauzot strategy. We have to think. We have to think. So, Madam President, this is an initiative that is great coming from the government of St. Lucia. And we don't even have to outline all of the other benefits that the people of St. Lucia have gotten. They all know. It's on that they check their boxes and they know where they stand. They know who to support and who not to support. And so, this initiative that benefits first-time owners, land or potential first-time owners, as well as businesses, I wish to commend to the Senate for their approval. I thank you.
Senators, the question is that the income... Senators, the presiding officer shall be heard in silence. Senators, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment number 2 bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 15.02.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Insertion of new section 59D.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
I have a question on that. No. Yes, so clause 3, insertion of section 59D. I'm still wondering where the 22,000 square feet limit came from, because down south, many young people, they buy 1 acre of land. It could be family land that they buy, but they have to take a loan to get 1 acre of land. So I'm asking for us to remain connected to the reality of the young people all around the island. I know up north it's probably 6,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. But for those who have the opportunity to secure 1 acre of land and they have to get a loan to buy that land, first-time landowners, we should consider their situations. Do you agree, Madam Chair, Senators? Unless I can understand why the 22,000 is the limit.
Senator Prevel.
Do I stand? No. Committee stage. So in the you are what now? The president stage? Chair. Yes, I'm referring to the clause that Senator, clause 3, that Senator Norbert raised. And I was wondering, Madam President, in light of what he has said, and I think what is intended here is a maximum of 22,000 square feet. Yeah. So if one were to purchase land of, let us say, an acre of land, which would be 43,520 square feet of land, I would assume, and maybe the decision may want to be very clear, that the first 22,000 square feet, that portion is what this legislation would apply to, and anything above that would not be subject to the legislation. I'm assuming that what the government is seeking to do is to ensure that it does not allow abuse of the privilege, because this is a privilege.
1 acre.
So the government is saying that we do not want persons to literally buy a whole heap of land and still claim a benefit of the 50% tax break later on. So they want to put a cap on it. So it would seem to me, unless we can come up with language that says that if it is not clearly indicated there, what is intended is for this 22,000 square feet cap and everything else.
Can the cap be 1 acre?
Madam President,
Leader of Government Business.
When legislation is being contemplated, it is done through consultation, it is done through research, and there would be a basis for the amount here. This legislation particularly points to residential property, and so in general, and we have to look at it throughout the entire St. Lucia. The only thing I could do is to find out from the Attorney General what was the rationale behind the 22,000 square feet. But I think when you look at the legislation in general, it is for first-time landowners, and it is one that you could see that they were trying to avoid exploitation. You do not want the haves to be able to go out and purchase large property and so on. You want to ensure that it is for low to middle income first-time owners, and that is the basis. That's one of the bases for having it at that level. You don't want people buying, when you buy a whole acre, this is not for agriculture, this is for residential purposes. And so that is the basis for it. But
1 acre is residential. A lot of the young people down south, they're low income, but they can buy 1 acre of land.
Okay, in light of that, I mean, we did pose the question, clause 3 stands part of the bill, and the ayes had it. I know in that regard, the process would always continue. So, leader of government business, if in consultation with the Office of the Attorney General, you get anything more that needs to come back for an amendment, that can be done. Until such time, we proceed, and leader of government business being the link person with the Office of the Attorney General can do the necessary conversations for, if necessary, for any amendments, further amendments. Okay, we proceed. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 96.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 134.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Income Tax Amendment number 2 bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Income Tax Amendment number 2 bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Income Tax Amendment number 2 Act 2026.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment.
Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment. Madam President, St. Lucia's participation in the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information framework under the Common Reporting Standard developed by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is a clear expression of our country's commitment to transparency, accountability, and responsible international cooperation. Through this framework, St. Lucia automatically exchanges information relating to financial accounts held by tax residents of partner jurisdictions, thereby supporting the global effort to combat offshore tax evasion. Madam President, the value of this framework cannot be overstated. It strengthens the ability of tax authorities to identify and address offshore tax evasion, promotes fairness in the tax system, supports domestic revenue collection, and reinforces St. Lucia's standing as a jurisdiction that upholds good governance and international best practice. St. Lucia is now undergoing the second round peer review assessment, which evaluates the effective implementation of the Common Reporting Standard. This is a critical moment. The proposed amendments are therefore not merely technical adjustments. They are necessary measures to strengthen our legislative framework, demonstrate continued compliance with international standards, and protect St. Lucia's reputation as a trusted and cooperative financial jurisdiction. These amendments, Madam President, are necessary and timely because they will strengthen the powers of the competent authority to monitor compliance and obtain information, introduce a more effective and proportionate penalty framework for non-compliance, ensure that sanctions may be applied not only to reporting financial institutions, but also to other persons responsible for breaches of the legislation, strengthen anti-avoidance provisions designed to prevent arrangements intended to circumvent reporting obligations, facilitate enforcement against persons who provide false self-certifications, and ensure that St. Lucia's legislative framework remains consistent with international standards. Madam President, by supporting these amendments, this Senate will help to safeguard St. Lucia's international exchange relationships, strengthen confidence in our financial system, and reduce the risk of reputational and economic consequences associated with non-compliance. I therefore commend these amendments for the favorable consideration of the Senate.
Senators, the question is that the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Norbert.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, to be fair, there are positive aspects to this legislation. The opposition has identified, and we support the legislation. The bill we see it seeks to strengthen international compliance, improve transparency, assist in combating tax evasion, protect St. Lucia's international reputation, which is very important to us, and maintain access to international financial systems. All of these are legitimate and important objectives. So the question is not whether those objectives are worthwhile. But for us, we are considering whether Parliament has adequately examined the methods being used to achieve these objectives. I know we're going through all three stages today. Madam President, the bill expands powers. It broadens liability and it introduces significant penalties. It creates new anti-avoidance provisions. It affects a wide range of entities. It will affect a wide range of Yes, Leader of Government Business. Thank you. It will affect a wide range of entities and individuals in St. Lucia. Yet once again, We find ourselves, Madam President, debating highly technical legislation without benefit of visible committee examination. This is precisely why I keep advocating for stronger parliamentary committees. You see, the standing orders provide for committee reports. The standing orders provide for questions, for petitions, for motions, for legislative scrutiny. Yet these mechanisms remain underutilized. I would like to fully understand the nature, every single clause of the bill before it goes through all three stages in Parliament. Especially when I have questions, I know that maybe a phone call, a conversation could be had and I could get clarification on my reservations. Major legislation should not simply move from introduction to passage with limited
Senator,
engagement.
just a point of correction. This is not a new bill. This is an amendment being made to the bill.
The new amendment. Thank you, Madam President. So, Parliament works best when legislation is subjected to detailed examination. That's the point that I am making, Madam President. Whether it's a new bill or an amendment, we should ensure that it goes through all three stages. And so we just have a few recommendations that we would be glad if the government could consider. I know that we do not have a select amendment committee in our Parliament, but these are some amendments that we would love to see included in this bill to strengthen the bill and to ensure that St. Lucians get protection and of course we comply with international standards. Amendment number 1, just 4 of them. We should require the competent authority, Madam President, to submit an annual report to Parliament detailing the inspections that will be conducted, if any, the penalties that are imposed so we know who is being penalized, how much they are fined, whether any appeals will be filed, and whether appeals are successful. So we want Parliament needs to keep an eye on what is going to be happening in St. Lucia, and so we would like for timely annual reports to be submitted to Parliament. Amendment 2, we would ask that the bill requires something like a warrant or written reasons whenever inspections will be exercised. And amendment number 3, if a publication of compliance guidelines could be published, could be provided to Parliament and of course to the people of St. Lucia, it would increase transparency. You see, it's one thing to come here and say that this bill is in an effort for us to be more transparent and to be more accountable, but these have to be visible. Every St. Lucian must get a chance to engage and to get first-hand information, not different interpretations of paragraphs in documents, but St. Lucians need to get answers to their questions from the people who have the answers. I wish I could, interview the Attorney General when I have a question on a bill myself and not have to wait for someone else to ask on my behalf. And Amendment 4 requires statutory review of the amendments after 2 years. Just these 4 amendments. So, Madam President, in closing, we support transparency, we support international cooperation, we support compliance to global standards. It is therefore in the spirit of improving, not obstructing, this legislation that we have raised these concerns and these recommendations. Thank you, Madam President.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Norbert, for your contribution. We will take into account the amendments the concerns that you have presented, and do what is necessary if it is. So, Madam President, I beg to move that to move on to the committee stage. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the automatic exchange of financial account information amendment bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Act, Chapter 12.27.
It is a long one, but just before I start, I noted Senator Norbert expressed that he would have loved to have conversation with the Attorney General instead of the leader of government business representing him. I'm saying to Senator Norbert, as a senator parliamentarian, you have the right to go to the Attorney General's office, make an appointment, and have a conversation with the drafters, with the person in there. That is your prerogative to do so. So when you are presented with a document and you're not sure you need more information, you can simply make an appointment and have a conversation. Even during the House sitting, the members of the drafting team, they are here in the House. So it's easy for you to do that. So it's not left to the leader of government business to represent you in what your contributions may be. You may do so even before you come to the Senate. You can sit with the Attorney General, okay? I just wanted to advise you on that.
Thanks for the information on the pre-legislative scrutiny.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 5B.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Substitution of Section 6.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 14.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Substitution of Section 16.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 17.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 18.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 19.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 11.
Amendment of Section 20.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 12.
Amendment of Section 22.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 13.
Amendment of Section 23.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 14.
Substitution of Section 24.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 15.
Amendment of Section 25.
Clause 15 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 16.
Insertion of new Schedule 3.
Clause 16 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that a report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Act 2026.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment.
St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment. Madam President, tourism is changing rapidly, and St. Lucia must move with it. This government has therefore pursued institutional reform to strengthen the sector, expand opportunity, and ensure tourism delivers real benefits for the people of St. Lucia. Since July 2021, the sector has opened more space for St. Lucians to own and operate businesses, while strategic foreign investment continues to strengthen the tourism product. Government has also advanced practical destination development projects, including the View at the Mon, Asfoy Lookout Point, the Redwe Vendors Facility and Toilet Block, the Marsha Artisan Village, and Phase 1 of the Underwater Sculpture Park. These initiatives are intended to improve the visitor experience and create more livelihood opportunities for St. Lucians. The St. Lucia Arsenal Partnership further demonstrates the scale of opportunity before the country, placing St. Lucia before a global audience and opening new possibilities for young St. Lucians. These gains must be matched by stronger institutional arrangements. The St. Lucia Tourism Authority has served St. Lucia since its establishment under Act number 8 of 2017. But in today's competitive environment, it must be structured for faster execution, clearer accountability, and stronger results. Under the 2017 Act, Madam President, Section 22 listed the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Corporate Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and other necessary employees as the officers of the authority. The earlier Tourism Industry Development Act provided a simpler staffing model centered on a Director of Tourism, a Secretary, and other staff required for the board's work. The present amendment moves the St. Lucia Tourism Authority closer to that flexible approach. Rather than transferring product development and destination management away from the ministry, this government has chosen a more disciplined path. Strengthen the ministry, focus the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, and align each institution with the work it is best placed to perform. When the St. Lucia Tourism Authority was established, its wider functions may have justified a larger statutory structure. However, the 2020 amendment returned product development to to the ministry, reducing the authority's scope. The organizational structure was not adjusted accordingly. The inherited structure now limits flexibility, and the board must be empowered to organize the authority for efficient, effective delivery. The bill therefore amends Section 2, 9, and 22 to remove statutory references to the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Corporate Officer. It also substitutes the role of Secretary in Sections 19, 23, and 25 so that the board retains the support required for its work. Fiduciary responsibility will also rest with the Chief Executive Officer as reflected in the amendments to Section 21 and 24. This reform is urgent, Madam President. The SLTA must be able to promote St. Lucia's strongest selling points with the flexibility required in a market defined by competition, innovation, and growth. After nearly 9 years, the SLTA requires legislative adjustment to support growth and improve delivery in a globally competitive environment. The 2020 removal of tourism product development from the SLTA reduced its original scope. This bill corrects the resulting structural gap. Madam President, comparable legislation was reviewed, including the laws governing St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, Cultural Development Foundation, Citizenship by Investment Unit, and Invest St. Lucia. These models generally place responsibility on the head of the organization to employ the staff needed to manage its affairs. The bill will allow the SLTA to review its structure, align human resources with the destination marketing plan, improve efficiency, and build a team required for a modern tourism sector. Madam President, this amendment bill is therefore presented as a necessary measure to modernize the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, strengthen efficiency, and better position it to serve St. Lucia. The support of this Senate is respectfully sought for its passage. I thank you.
Senators, the question is that the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the St. Lucia Tourism Authority is a very important organization to the economic development of St. Lucia. It is, Madam President, the destination marketing arm of our lead economic driver, tourism. Madam President, when I became the Minister of Tourism back in 2016, we looked around the Caribbean and we saw the countries that were performing were the ones who had a very clear separation between the marketing functions, the product development functions, and the events functions. When we inherited the old St. Lucia Tourist Board, Madam President, the reality was a significant portion of its monies was spent on doing events and paying salaries, while little of its budget was spent on the actual marketing of the destination. And if you go back, Madam President, you would see that tourism arrivals were quite soft with that arrangement. You compare what was happening in Aruba, a very outstanding Caribbean destination, you would see that they had a total separation. You look at the construct of the various tourism organizations in Barbados, you would see that they have a separate company or statutory body for product development. They have a separate company for the marketing arm, and they also have a separate company for events as well. Madam President, the Labour Party administration of Dr. Kenny Anthony, which we replaced, also agreed that the former St. Lucia Tourist Board was overloaded with planning of events. And so what they thought to do was to organize the St. Lucia Events Company. And it was something that we met, we agreed with, and we decided that we would go further to restructure the St. Lucia Tourism Authority. And we went further to also copy what was being done in Aruba, whereby Aruba has, the tourism authority there has its own financing mechanism. And that financing mechanism removed the funding to market tourism away from competing in the consolidated fund or in government general pickup of taxes, where we competed with education and agriculture and healthcare and national security for marketing funds for the tourism authority. So we created, Madam President, for the first time in history, the revenue stream for the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, so that the authority can pick up its own funds, hence the establishment of the head tax for tourists coming into St. Lucia. Now that annual pickup is somewhere in the region of $40+ million, which went straight towards the operations and to execute the functions of the Tourism Authority. This amendment today proposes, Madam President, that there is going to be less of a focus on the chief executive officer. If we look at the explanatory note in section 10 of that section of the legislation being proposed, clause 9 of the bill repeals section 24 of the act, the chief financial officer, to remove the chief financial officer, as these functions will be carried out by the chief executive officer of the authority. Please. Madam President, you have $40 million plus. Plus as well, you also have monies coming from the government. In fact, when I look at the estimates, I see that there are going to be monies from the Ministry of, under the Ministry of Tourism, on the Department of Tourism, which will also be given to the authority, because part of its funding, it can be subventions depending on what's happening. So you've got this revenue stream of all of these hotels that are picking up the tourism head tax. But yet, Madam President, you're saying to me that you don't need a chief financial officer. And instead, what we are going to do, we're going to combine the role that the chief executive officer is already playing to manage the entire institution, to ensure that the organization is running effectively, that is already hard-pressed to deal with so many marketing initiatives. And you're saying to me that you removed the chief financial officer, so who's going to manage the money? I would like a lot more explanation from the leader of government business as it pertains to how will the funds, the millions going into the tourism authority, how is that going to be managed, and why are we combining the role of the chief executive officer with that of the chief financial officer? It beats me. I am baffled. I am very intrigued to see what's the explanation. Now, Madam President, the timing in which we're doing this is quite intriguing. Madam President, the St. Lucia Tourism Authority has just recorded and they have done a report on the destination performance. Cruise tourism, according to that report on page 15, cruise tourism is 87% down. Year to date, 87% down. The UK market, Madam President, is significantly down. The stayover arrivals have only grown by 1%. One. When we add up the total destination arrivals between stayover, cruise, and yacht, the total is minus 6% in the performance of the destination. And you're going to tell me a CEO who's already failing to produce the results, to drive the arrival numbers up, you're going to give him more responsibility rather than ensure that he focus on recovering the destination and to make sure that the numbers are coming in very strong. This is a retrograde step by the government. I can't believe that given these circumstances where the UK market is now 13% down, the Caribbean is now 10.2% down. Overall, the stayover arrivals, 0.7% change. And you're going to say to me that you're going to give the CEO more responsibility to now be bogged down with managing $40 million plus to in an institution that is responsible for marketing the lead sector of the economy, tourism, which generates somewhere about 40% of direct contribution to GDP and another 20 to 25% indirect contribution to GDP. And the CEO is now going to assume the role of running the money as well? Is that what this is trying to do? Please, can somebody explain why are we repealing Section 24 of the Act, where it says remove Chief Financial Officer, as these functions will be carried out by the Chief Executive Officer of the authority? Madam President, there's also an issue of financial management here. I think that financial management and proper procedure would mandate that the responsibility, that there are checks and balances. That if you have a CEO, a Chief Executive Officer of an institution, that Chief Executive Officer would have a very strong person with a financial or accounting background to ensure that the procedures, the financial procedures are not violated, and that there is proper accountability of the country's resources, and to ensure that the reports are on time. The CEO is responsible for making sure that the organization functions properly, and its key function is to market St. Lucia overseas as a tourism destination of choice to compete with other tourism destinations around the world. So for me to also lump into him this big responsibility, to me it compromises the checks and balances that you would need in the proper functioning of a financial department. Correct. But also it also compromises the CEO's own ability to get this done. Now, I heard in the explanatory note that the government also plans to return product development to the Tourism Authority, an authority that can't even get the arrival numbers up. Why would you then give them to go and build a lookout point, to go and get training for the destination done? This is what product development entails. Why don't you leave that with the ministry? This has a lot of research to be done. This has a lot of thinking and planning. The Tourism Authority needs to deal with the more corporate day-to-day hustle and grind of marketing and corporate work that requires them to stay ahead of the curve, because we are competing in a very competitive business, tourism. More and more destinations are recognizing that tourism can play a significant role in their economic development plan, and they are getting into tourism. You just go through and flick through the travel pages of any travel publication in the world, or websites, or social media pages. And there are so many destinations that are popping up all over the world. You can go to Mauritius in the Indian Ocean that offers the same product like us. You can go down in the Maldives. You can go to so many Caribbean destinations, so many regions, and we've got so much work to do. But you want to straddle the marketing agency with an additional job to go and to do product development, which is going to deal with infrastructure projects, which is going to deal with training and anything as it relates to product development in the country. But that doesn't make any sense at all. I can't understand what is going on. The Barbados model, they have the Barbados Product Development Company. It is totally separate from the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. or the Barbados Tourism Authority Inc. Destinations are recognizing that you cannot saddle your marketing arm with the onerous job of product development, planning for the entire destination, making sure that our sites, our attractions, and all of these things are cutting edge. So for me, Madam President, it's a retrograde step. I do not understand why there seems to be a diluting of the role as well of the chief corporate officer. I just don't understand why, but I think such a structure is very important given the fact that the Tourism Authority is a revenue agency now as well. It is very unique. And I think just a few agencies like SLASPA, for example, that collect their revenue and have a revenue component, it beats me that you would be combining the role of the CEO and the chief financial officer. You need the chief financial officer to have the checks and balances and to make sure that the revenues coming into the authority is collected properly. I see that as a retrograde step, Madam President. I do not support this amendment. I thank you.
Senator Norbert.
Yes, Madam President. I rise to reiterate the points made by Senator Fede. I have serious questions concerning this amendment. The CEO I see here will now manage organizational performance, report directly to the board, oversee accounting. The CEO is going to oversee financing. The CEO will prepare budgeting, undertake forecasting, perform job costing, perform other costing functions, perform any other function assigned by the board. Madam President, if some CEO say bon Dieu, that's a lot of responsibility. I see before there was a CEO, there was a chief financial officer, there was a chief corporate officer, but now we only have one person performing nearly everything. So for me, is the government really reducing bureaucracy, or is the government trying to eliminate the internal controls somehow? Because I'm currently doing a course in governance, and to me, the principle of segregation of duties is listed as best practice. Right. But I'm seeing here that this bill merges operations, finance, and internal administration. And no matter how many questions we ask today, no matter how much noise we make about this concern, I do not think that pushing this again for all three stages is doing the people of St. Lucia justice. So, Madam President, I won't waste my time any further, but this bill is very worrying. I cannot support this bill with so many unanswered questions, and I wish at least a select committee could be formed to consider the amendments and have an active question time in Parliament so that our Parliament can be more engaging and our democracy can be kept alive. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Preble.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to, of course, provide support to the arguments that have been raised so far by my colleague Senators Fede and Norbert. And the gist of my contribution to this debate on this particular bill amendment to the St. Lucia Tourism Authority bill is in terms of governance, the need for us to ensure that any amendments made to our legislation actually reinforce good governance but does not dilute it. That's the first point of concern. And secondly, to discuss and to place on record the need for any amendments to strengthen performance. Now, under those two broad headings, when we speak of good governance, and I take a note that Section 22, the substitution of a Section 22, it reads here, Section 22, one of the Principal Act is amended by deleting subsection 1 and substituting the following. The Chief Executive Officer shall appoint at such remuneration on such terms and conditions as may be approved by the board, such employees as the board considers necessary for the performance of the functions and powers of the authority. Now, I assume that that section 22 here is what is being used as the vehicle to institute whatever checks and balances or whatever mechanisms that would address the performance-related issues in terms of a chief financial officer or chief corporate officer and so forth. I assume this is what this is seeking to do. But, Madam President, the concern that I have with this section is that we already have clearly defined roles for a chief financial officer. And by doing this, we now open up a new area of uncertainty. So I would have perhaps suggested that with respect to, and I take note of the comments made by the leader of government business when she presented this bill, that she spoke of the need for flexibility in how we treat with our tourism, important tourism area today. But I would have said, instead of perhaps removing existing clearly defined structures that separate powers, we would perhaps add whatever it is that is needed, as opposed to leaving it open now to the insertion of different positions. So, Madam President, my main concern is that we ensure in any amendments made to this very important sector, our tourism industry, critical industry, we are very clear with respect to the lines of governance, and that we strengthen as opposed to in any way providing wiggle room for dilution. So this is important. This is one of the areas where I believe we need to spend some time reflecting carefully on what is being proposed in this legislation with respect to the governance structure of our tourism authority. Now, with respect to the performance aspects of that tourism authority, I think Senator Fede raised some very important points in terms of the thrust and purpose of that authority. And it is in fact true. It is in fact true and can be researched that, and I'm not saying that the way it is done in one country is the way it ought to be done in every country. But it is also true that we look around us and we see how persons who perform well are doing, what they have in place that get them to perform as they do, and we may want to examine their models closer. And in that regard, when we look at the process for tourism development and the overall management of tourism in Barbados, we see a very well-organized breakout of responsibility. We see there is a product development distinct responsibility. We see a marketing distinct responsibility. They go as far as having under tourism the whole airlift. In other words, civil aviation is further divided to have a department that deals with external airlift for tourism. I made that point, Madam President, to say that we are in a very competitive environment for our tourism industry. It is the most important industry for our country right now. And therefore, it would be always prudent for us to look at what models work best for our competitors and give serious consideration to what we introduce so that we are not worse off, but we are better off. And in this regard, I would recommend strongly that any amendments made to our legislation give more specificity to the various functions that strengthen our tourism industry, marketing, airlift, product development. I would strongly recommend that our legislation gives specificity to these in terms of what they ought to do, instead of creating any structures that blow responsibility. So, with this, Madam President, I wish to thank you for allowing my contribution to this debate. Thank you very much.
Senator Charles.
Madam President, it's just a small point, but I think just taking my cue from Senator Previll is that it's clear that an organization like the St. Lucia Tourism Authority requires someone to manage its finances. And it's not clear enough that if you're removing something, what replaces it? And the question is for the leader of government business, perhaps to give us some indication, if she has the information, as to if you're going to remove the chief financial officer, what or who will be in the place of the chief financial officer. And I think that is my only question I have on the amendment, Madam President.
Senator Albert Poyat.
Madam President, I rise in support of the amendment of the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, where it is proposed that there are some fundamental changes that are necessary to improve the functioning of this institution. And Madam President, maybe by incident or coincidence, I'm sitting in the parliamentary seat of the minister who is responsible for tourism. So in the house, so in the lower house. So maybe I will get some inspiration from the seat so that I espouse some of what is going through his mind and in his ministry. And I heard Senator Dominic Fede, who was a former Minister of Tourism, who makes himself an authority in tourism and feel he is in a position to speak to that matter. But Madam President, the amendments that are proposed there is basically looking at administration of the institution. And working inside of the institution, the persons who are best placed to recommend changes are those who feel the heat inside. Sometimes on the outside we say what we want, we like things, but we don't understand the intricacies in terms of the operation. And therefore, I will give my full blessings to this amendment so that we can improve the operations of the institution. I see the removal of the financial officer and passing it on to the CEO, basically giving the CEO oversight, because the CEO is the one who is accountable to the board of directors, and therefore the CEO is given that responsibility to have a full grasp of what is happening in the institution. So apparently I take it to mean that there was a gap, and this amendment will close that gap so that there is better management. And as was raised by Senator Previll, if you look at subsection 22, it makes provision for the CEO and the board to appoint persons to carry out other functions, including the financial functions of the institution. So when we sit and we assume that everything is going on right, these are the people who have the authority, because a lot of things take a lot of time, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of red tape to get things done. These are the people who are best placed to ensure that this institution is successful. And I am wondering, when Senator Fede opposes that amendment, he has not proposed anything different to what's there. So I don't know if he is aware of what is going on inside there. But he also touted that there is a drop in tourism and what is not doing well. And here we are seeing efforts being made to improve the operation, and he's opposing it without having any concrete evidence to say why this will not work and why this is not work. I always find difficulty, Madam President, in persons who are already saying they will not complete a journey by refusing to make the first step. For you to complete a journey, you must first take the first step. And that is how the journey starts. And along the way, you will decide how far you can reach. But we are afraid of taking the first step. And when I see this amendment, I see it as, and I am familiar with some of the people who work in that institution, and from all the doom and gloom that is being paraded in this chamber, that is tourism that is the lifeline of the economy in St. Lucia. At one time we had agriculture, now tourism has taken the lead, and the Prime Minister and his government will put everything in place to ensure that tourism is successful in St. Lucia. I will not doubt this amendment. I will put all my confidence in it. And with that, Madam President, I give my full support, regardless of what some people think on the outside. And they were there at some point, Madam President. They did not put one extra room for tourism. We are seeing so much being done in line of tourism. So the same way we express confidence in that, we see a lot of new rooms being constructed. We are seeing marketing. We are seeing a lot of things. And the Prime Minister is pleased with the revenue that tourism is generating to keep this economy afloat. So this amendment is part of the thrust to improve tourism, Madam President. And I give my full support to the governance structure, to the administrative structure, and to ensure that these institutions function efficiently and effectively. I thank you.
Senator Ignatius Jean.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to rise to support the amendment to the Tourism St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Act.
Senator, could you speak a little closer to the mic?
My apologies, Madam President.
Yes.
I think it's very cold in here, so I wish somebody could adjust the temperature in here. I may have to. I thought I was somewhere in the northern part of the world. Yes, Madam President. So I rise to support the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Act 2026. And of course, I listened to some of the concerns by members opposite, and I think Senator Preville did indicate and saw where that there shouldn't be that type of concern as much, because it is spelled here in the substitution of Section 22 at Section 7, where the Principal Act is amended by deleting Section 1 by substituting the following: the Chief Executive Officer shall appoint at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions as may be approved by the board, such employees as the board considers necessary for the performance of the functions and powers of the authority. And as indicated by the Honorable Minister in the lower house, that they were making some of these adjustments in the context of some of the changes and to become a little more efficient in the operations of the authority. And of course, he did also point to that the point is here, you have a CEO who is reporting to the board and as Senator Poyot indicated, has oversight over the total administration of the organization. He or she is the chief accounting officer, and so would have that responsibility, but it doesn't take away that they would still have to have people doing finance and accounting and so on in the department. I think it is supposed, I see that as some of the regularization of the ultimate authority within the organization. The other part of the bill which I support is that in the amendment of subsection 23, where the Principal Act is amended by deleting section 23 and by substituting the following: Secretary. The board shall appoint a secretary to serve as secretary to the board, with the functions of the secretary to include managing board and committee logistics, attending, recording, and minutes of the board and committee meetings, etc., etc. So I think these are some of the minor structural adjustments within the organization, and rather than saying chief corporate officer, as most of the statutory boards have in place, is to have a secretary more in line with what obtains under the Companies Act, Madam President. So I think these are the concerns. But you know, I think the former Minister of Tourism always paints a brush of doom and gloom about everything, and that it appears that we have no resources in this country, we do not have good people in this country, our tourism is crashing, everything is crashing in this country. And the fact on the ground is different. And it's not about opinion, it's about fact. Go on the ground and see what's going with tourism. See the brilliant people we have working in the in the Ministry of Tourism, in the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, in Events St. Lucia, and you have seen the development of events in St. Lucia. You know, we have some brilliant young people working in these departments and these agencies of the state. And all over the place, people are wowing about what's taking place in St. Lucia. By the next weekend, you will see on the road what is going on in St. Lucia. But you want to paint a brush that we have produced some of the finest minds in this region and anywhere in the world. So don't come here and show and say that everything is better in another island and it's better in Aruba and it's better in Barbados. Have confidence in yourself. Let's believe in our people. Put St. Lucians first. This is what we are. Devant ensemble. This is what you should be preaching. But you come here and you're always painting a negative brush. Be positive, my friend. Let us think positive. Devant ensemble. Madam President, I support the amendment. Thank you.
Before Senator Deal, I just want to ask Senator Jean, will he be on the road? Because he said, look out for people on the road. Senator, will you be on the road? Okay. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I've listened to the presentations on both sides thus far this morning, and my questions are purely with regard to governance issues. The rationale given by the leader of government business for the changes that are envisaged by this bill are to make the St. Lucia Tourism Authority more flexible and a more efficient organization. That being said, I looked at the Act and I realized that the Act spelled out very clearly what the role of the CEO was or is, spells out very clearly what the role of the Chief Corporate Officer is, and spells out, perhaps most importantly, very clearly what the role of the Chief Financial Officer is. And I don't understand how removing, because this piece of legislation will remove completely from the Act the position of Chief Financial Officer, and will then seek to move those responsibilities. And if you can give me a few minutes just to outline what those responsibilities currently are. Section 24(2) of the Act says that let me start from Section 1. The Chief Financial Officer shall have day-to-day responsibility for planning, implementing, managing, and controlling financial-related activities of the authority. It then goes on to say at subsection 2, without prejudice to the generality of the subsection 1, the Chief Financial Officer shall be responsible for accounting, finance, forecasting, job costing, property management, negotiations, and private and institutional financing. I don't understand how moving that function to the CEO, who is responsible for, removing the responsibility, and that's under Section 23, removing responsibility for serving as Secretary of the Board, and I agree with that change, that is fine. Manage board and committee meeting logistics, attend, record minutes of the board and committee meetings, facilitate board communications, monitor corporate governance developments, assist the board in adhering to corporate governance practices. Sorry, that's Chief Corporate Officer. Apologies, Madam President. Section 21, sets out the Chief Financial Officer's duties. The board shall, with the approval of the minister, appoint a person as Chief Executive Officer on such terms and conditions as the board determines. Subsection 2, the Chief Executive Officer shall manage the day-to-day affairs of the authority, implement the strategic risk and compliance initiatives set by the board and other decisions of the board, measure, attain performance targets approved by the board, communicate board decisions, policies, and priorities to employees, present organizational performance reports and budgets to the board, attend meetings of the board unless directed otherwise by the chairperson, but have no voting rights in the meeting, and perform the functions assigned to him under this Act. How does adding to those already burdensome functions that the CEO is required to facilitate or undertake the rather extensive responsibilities of the Chief Financial Officer to that role make this body more efficient and more flexible? I can understand removing, like I said, the Chief Operating Corporate Officer and having a separate secretary to fulfill those functions. But perhaps I didn't understand, or perhaps the leader of government business needs to give us a little bit more explanation as to how exactly these changes in practice will impact positively on the operations of the Social Tourism Authority and result in the improvements that she has indicated. I can understand the CEO being responsible for overseeing the Chief Financial Officer, and I have no issue with that, and ultimately being answerable to the board for the accounts. But given that this is not a tea boutique, this is a large organization with a massive budget, and given the fact that the CEO has tremendous responsibilities which often have him off island, I don't understand how, and I know I've said this before, but I don't understand how moving the functions of the Chief Financial Officer to the CEO is going to improve governance, is going to improve efficiency, and it's going to improve flexibility of this organization. I await the response of the leader of government business to enlighten me as to how these changes are going to improve things. Thank you, Madam President.
Leader of government business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you very much, Senators, for your contribution to this debate. Thank you very much to the senators on the government side who have provided elucidation, clarification on some of the questions that have been asked. I think Senator Poyot provided some of the clarification that has been asked by Senator Lee. However, I will reiterate that in the amendment that we are pursuing at this time, it indicates that the CEO at Section 7, I think it was Senator Zhe, the Chief Executive Officer shall appoint at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions as may be approved by the board, such employees as the board considers necessary. Madam President, in human resource management, it is extremely important to constantly review your business and to align the resources that are required for the effective and efficient running of that business. And so you have to review your operations. It doesn't mean that by removing the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Corporate Officer that the authority will remain without staff. It is an opportunity that is being given to the authority to bring in the appropriate human resources that are necessary for the changing times. So, Madam President, this amendment is to allow the board of the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, because think about it, Madam President, why was it necessary to outline only 2 positions, apart from the CEO, to outline only the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Corporate Officer and to put their duties and everything in the Act? Does that mean that these are the only positions that exist within the authority? Why weren't the other positions included in the legislation? Why wasn't the cleaner's position placed in the legislation? Why wasn't the chief, whatever other directors placed in the legislation? We now will have the Chief Executive Officer's position, and the Chief Executive Officer's functions are going to be outlined to run the day-to-day operations and, in collaboration with the board, hire the appropriate staff. So, Madam President, this is clear. There are, and again, consultation with the other pieces of legislation that relate to statutory bodies, and it is aligned with these others. So, Madam President, I have nothing further to add except to reiterate the point that was made by Senator Zhe, that we need to celebrate the successes of our country. St. Lucia, Madam President, is jealously looked upon by the rest of the world. St. Lucia has been awarded the honeymoon destination, the #1 honeymoon destination, perpetually, Madam President. Every single year. The other thing too, if Senator Fede realizes, as the tourism guru, realizes that things are bad in St. Lucia, tourism is down and so on, and the government is making changes to improve on the efficiencies of the various institutions that are supposed to be pushing our tourism product, then aren't we doing the right thing? You say it's broke, we're fixing it. And so, what is wrong with us doing this? So, Madam President, we have to see merit in what the government is doing. We have to recognize that Organizational structures must be reviewed. They cannot remain stagnant. It was changed in 2020. We don't know why. We are now moving along to fix it. And so, Madam President, I present this amendment bill to the Senate for your support. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Act, Chapter 15.32.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 9.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 19.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 21.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Substitution of Section 22.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
Substitution of Section 23.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Repeal of Section 24.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 25.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the St. Lucian Tourism Authority Amendment Act 2026.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Tourism Development Amendment.
Tourism Development Amendment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Tourism Development Amendment. Madam President, I rise to present and commend for your careful consideration the proposed amendment to the Tourism Development Act. This amendment is not merely a technical revision of legislative language. It is a timely and necessary measure to modernize the governance of one of St. Lucia's most vital sectors, strengthen transparency, support responsible investment, and ensure that our tourism framework remains responsive to the realities of a changing economy. Tourism continues to be central to national growth, employment, entrepreneurship, foreign exchange earnings, and community development. For this reason, Madam President, the law that governs tourism development must be clear, efficient, and capable of supporting both established operators and emerging opportunities. The proposed amendment responds directly to that need by clarifying institutional responsibility, improving certification processes, strengthening accountability, and creating a more flexible framework for future sector development. Madam President, one of the important features of this amendment is the replacement of references to the department with references to the ministry. This change aligns the Act with the current institutional structure and removes uncertainty about responsibility. In practical terms, it helps ensure that tourism operators, investors, public officers, and the wider public know which authority is responsible for administering the law. Clarity in public administration is not a minor matter, Madam President. When responsibility is clearly placed, decisions can be made more efficiently, obligations can be better understood, and accountability can be more effectively upheld. The amendment also strengthens the framework for tourism operator certification. It clarifies application procedures, supports the issuing of tourism certificates and conditional certificates, and provides for the publication of valid certificate holders in the Gazette. This is an important transparency measure. It gives the public, visitors, investors, and regulators a clearer view of who is operating within the formal tourism system. Madam President, transparency builds confidence. A published list of valid operators supports fair competition, protects the reputation of the destination, and encourages compliance across the sector. The proposed amendment adjusts the quorum requirements for the Tourism Certification Committee from 5 members to 3. This is a practical reform intended to support timely decision-making. It does not remove the need for deliberation or oversight. Rather, it helps prevent administrative delay from frustrating legitimate applications, investment plans, and business operations. In a competitive tourism environment, Madam President, responsiveness matters. Investors, small businesses, community-based operators, and service providers all benefit when the regulatory process is practicable, efficient, and fair. Madam President, another significant aspect of the amendment is the modernization of the incentives framework. The amendment seeks to prevent beneficiaries from receiving multiple incentives from the same source, while also allowing eligible persons to apply for incentives and additional incentives, including in support of resilience efforts. This strikes an important balance, Madam President. It supports fiscal responsibility by reducing duplication, while still recognizing that tourism operators must adapt to climate pressures, market changes, infrastructure needs, and sustainability expectations. A modern tourism law must not only encourage development, it must encourage durable, responsible, and resilient development. The amendment empowers the minister, after consultation, to prescribe additional tourism sectors and update schedules by publication in the Gazette. This flexibility is essential. Tourism is no longer confined to traditional accommodation and sightseeing. It now includes, Madam President, new experiences, niche services, wellness offerings, cultural products, heritage activities, digital promotion, and community-based enterprises like bamboo rafting. By allowing the law to respond through updated schedules, St. Lucia can better recognize emerging sectors and avoid the need for repeated legislative amendments whenever the industry evolves. Madam President, the amendment also introduces clearer procedures for warrants for disclosure and for reporting non-compliance by authorized officers. These provisions are important because a strong tourism sector must be supported by standards that are not only written into law, but also capable of being enforced. Compliance protects visitors, safeguards legitimate businesses, supports national reputation, and ensures that incentives and certificates are administered fairly. Madam President, this proposed amendment is a measured, practical, and forward-looking reform. It clarifies responsibility, improves transparency, strengthens certification, supports efficient administration, modernizes incentives, and gives St. Lucia the flexibility to respond to the continued evolution of tourism. I therefore, Madam President, commend the proposed amendment to the Senate as a necessary step in strengthening the legal foundation for sustainable tourism development in St. Lucia. I thank you.
Senators, the question is that Tourism Development Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Previll.
Thank you, Madam President. And my contribution on this is going to be very brief, Madam President. I have taken note of the lead of government's business, very well articulated explanation as to the rationale for the proposed amendments. And therefore, in keeping with this rationale, I wish to point to the insertion of a new section 61A that is being proposed in this legislation. So the principal act is, it is proposed in this legislation the Principal Act be amended by inserting immediately after Section 61 that new 61A. And the 61A says, and it is the subheading says, publication of list of holders of tourism certificates or sustainable tourism certificate. And 61A says the minister may publish in the Gazette a list of approved tourism operators with a valid tourism certificate or sustainable tourism certificate. And it gives the details as to what must be accompany the publication, the details. So the simple observation, Madam President, to the leader of government business, based on the explanation provided for clarity and transparency in the operations of our critical tourism sector, is that there's a word may. It says the minister may publish. And I was wondering if that is really the intent here or shall. Because if the intention is to ensure that the public is aware of what is happening with respect to holders of tourism certificates, if we leave it as a may, then it means the minister may choose not to. And therefore, I would say the legislation would be perhaps stronger or strengthened if that responsibility becomes a shall instead of a may. And that is placed before the leader of government business and the Senate for consideration. Now, there is only one other point I wish to draw to the attention of for the purpose of our discussion here. If we go to subsection 15 of the Act, of the proposed amended bill, it says here that the Principal Act is amended by deleting section 1511 and substituting 152. Sorry, thank you, Madam President. 1521 and substituting the following. So the new proposed 1521 reads, the minister may, after consultation with the permanent secretary by order published in the Gazette, amend Schedule 1 and 3. Now I understand the meaning of the word may here, because the schedule may not always be amended. But I want you to be very clear here that, and I'm not the lawyer, I'm not a drafter, I leave that to the drafters to be specific. Is it also intended here that the minister will always consult with the permanent secretary? In other words, we do not want any window here to be open where a minister simply on his own goes ahead and amend. So I was just wondering if the language here, and maybe it's my interpretation, leaves any room for that opening. So, Madam President, these are my two observations with respect to this particular proposed amendment.
Senator Fiddy.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, this bill is not that old. I think it was a legislation that the government passed. What year was it passed? But it's a couple years now. But we're coming back to the House to make these changes. Nothing wrong with that. I see, Madam President, that one of the fundamental changes that the government is proposing is in the quorum for the Tourism Certification Committee is amended to change the quorum of the Tourism Certification Committee from 5 to 3. I'm not quite sure why the government would feel the need to change the quorum in such a committee. Is it that you're not getting enough people to attend the meetings? Is it that, what is the rationale in changing the quorum? How is it going to help the Tourism Certification Committee in actually executing its functions efficiently while maintaining the rationale outlined by the leader of government business, and that is for us to strengthen transparency of the, no, you said transparency as well. Yeah, you said to strengthen transparency. It's one of the rationales given. So if it is that we're reducing the quorum, how does that align with your stated objective? Madam President, quite intriguingly, I see taxi drivers are now going to be required to register a company if they have 2 taxi plates, and if they have more than 2, they will have to go and incorporate a company under the Companies Act, which is, I'm sure taxi drivers are going to be very intrigued by this. I don't know whether the government is paying for the incorporation of these businesses, but I see a couple lawyers in the room, and I know that legal fees can be very expensive in terms of the incorporation of a company. So maybe the government is paying, I don't know. Maybe the taxi drivers will all be taken care of at SEDU, at the small business unit. I don't know. But that is quite a change in terms of how the taxi sector is actually operated. You know, Madam President, while we're talking about the taxi drivers, the government, I think, would have registered an additional, according to the former president of the taxi union, some 2,000 new taxi plates would have been issued by this administration. And the concern is within the taxi sector is that we have not seen a commensurate increase in the arrival numbers to accommodate such, meteoric rise in the taxi business for the tourism transportation. So while we're seeing almost a 200% increase, because I think the last, prior to that, we had about 1,200 taxi drivers registered, and now we have an additional 2,000. It would mean that you have almost 200% increase in terms of taxi plates. But arrivals, Madam President, have not necessarily seen that ballooning that we would like to accommodate all of the taxis that we have incorporated, or should I say the St. Lucia Labour Party government has instituted. So quite an interesting development in the taxi sector, and I'm watching as it unfolds, and I am very intrigued to see the outcome. So Madam President, taxi drivers are now going to, if you have 2 taxi plates, you will be required to register a company, and you will be required, if you have more than 2, to incorporate a company, do the full incorporation. So sorry, I mean, the first phase is a business name, and then the second one is incorporation of a company. Yeah? So my correction there. So, Madam President, these are some of the concerns that I have with the proposed amendments here in this bill. And I am also quite intrigued by the quorum changing from 5 to 3.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, Senators, for your contribution. Madam President, like I stated in my presentation, this amendment we could see is to assist tourism operators in improving their structure, improving their corporate structure. We know in such a sector and in business in general, there is liability. It seeks to increase security. In the case of the issue that Senator Fede raised regarding the quorum, we know sometimes in the sector you have, in several places, people are busy and difficult to get 5 people in a quorum, and so the emphasis was more on efficiency in the processing of certification. That's what I presented. And so this will seek to fast track the system and allow for there to be, on behalf, to benefit the people in the tourism sector. So I thank senators for their contribution, and I present this bill for approval. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the Tourism Development Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Tourism Development Act number 1 of 2024.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of heading for Division 1 of Part 1.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 5.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Substitution of Section 20.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 42.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 43.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Insertion of new Section 61A.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 77.
Clause 9.
My apologies. Though the ayes have it, but I'll still hear you out, I think, as a committee stage.
Yes, it's in committee stage. So I thought during the discussion in the earlier on, I had raised the issue of shall as opposed to may. I don't know if the committee may wish, we are in committee stage, thought could be given to that, and perhaps a little discussion.
Madam President, I think the essence here is for the minister to have discretion in publishing in the Gazette that list. However, I will submit it to the Attorney General to see whether there is merit in moving it to shall. In both of the cases I noticed you raised. The other case you raised was with respect to the consultation with the Permanent Secretary. Again, when we read it, it appears that it's really the publication, not the consultation, but it's the publication in the Gazette.
Madam President. So in the case of the latter, Madam President, I also concur that this might be the case. But with respect to Section 9, I think this one, yes, I think this is the one, leader of government business, I would strongly urge that you have the consultation with the Attorney General on.
So are you suggesting, Senator, that your preference is for shall, the mandatory compulsory
Correct.
requirement?
In terms of given the intent as articulated.
Okay.
Senator Ignatius Shah?
Yeah, I concur. I think if people are going to be given tourism certificates, and you want, as is done for several other types of incentives that they are published, even when they are tabled through SIs and it's made public. So I think it would be appropriate that public is aware of who is deriving those, who are the certified operators. And that helps to build public confidence.
Okay, so Senator, you shall convey.
Yes,
Madam, Clause 10. Okay. Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 77.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 11.
Amendment of Section 78.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 12.
Amendment of Section 79.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 13.
Amendment of Section 80.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 14.
Amendment of Section 86.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 15.
Amendment of Section 152.
Clause 15 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 16.
Amendment of Schedule 1.
Clause 16 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 17.
Amendment of Schedule 3.
Clause 17 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 18.
Repeal of Schedule 4.
Clause 18 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 19.
Amendment of Principal Act.
Clause 19 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Tourism Development Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments, though proposed, of course. Leader of Government Business. I said without changes, though proposed. The understanding was that the Leader of Government Business shall communicate to the Attorney General, and if needs be, to come back to make those changes.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and the Tourism Development Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Tourism Development Amendment Act 2026.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I begged for the suspension of the Senate until 2:15.
Senators, the question is that the Senate be suspended until 2:15 this afternoon. I now pose the question. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting suspended. All right.
Michael, here we are at a lunch break in the proceedings of this sitting of the Senate, which today has been dealing exclusively with bills. Yesterday we know we had the introduction of several statutory instruments and then of several resolutions. Almost all the resolutions had to do with borrowing to fund the budgetary proposals that were made in the estimates of revenue and expenditure to find money to pay for them. But there were not things that the Senate necessarily needed to debate or vote upon, as the Senate doesn't have jurisdiction, we are told, in the very constitution of St. Lucia, money matters. But today this isn't the case. What we're dealing with is a diversity of bills which are proposed legislation which have to go through the bicameral stage of the lower house, the House of Assembly, and the upper house, which is the Senate. And so far this morning we've heard debate on the income tax amendment. That was the first one of the blocks. There was also the automatic exchange of financial account information amendment and the St. Lucia Tourism Authority amendment bills. These all went through all the stages. In fact, it was put forward that they be taken through all the stages that at this sitting, even though the order paper says first reading. And the last one just concluded there, the Tourism Development Amendment Bill, and that one has been taken through all its stages. But interestingly, the proposal was made by the leader of the opposition business, Senator Dr. Titus Prevel, that he felt that a word which kind of gave a little too much leeway and ambiguity about the minister may. He said, no, let's nail it down to something more definite and say that the minister shall. And the leader of government business, Senator Dr. Addison John, said, okay, this is something that she can take and discuss with the Attorney General. And the same on both sides would have been general, we might say kind of consensus that this is something which would be desirable. Nevertheless, as is, the bill was taken through committee stage and it was returned and reported without any amendments. In other words, even though there may be something which is discussed, but at the time they said, let's go with it as is for the time being. So it has been read for the time and passed.
That's right. Thank you, Shelton. Merci Shelton. Comme on dit, c'est bon matin. Il était différent qui hier. Hier, c'était plutôt ces motions côté gouvernement qui a prêté l'argent avec une situation comme on t'a expliqué bon matin. La tenir c'est qu'à côté gouvernement pas prêter l'argent mais garantir l'argent pas pour bâtir un port en cul-de-sac. So, c'est pas tout c'était pour prêter l'argent avec un chèque aussi c'est aussi une motion qui était discutée hier, mais c'était ces affaires, ça nous a dit c'est bon, ce côté gouvernement qui a essayé de garder sur ça, amasser l'argent par bon, car le crédit, il y a l'argent en manière crédit. Mais aujourd'hui, ça, c'est Sénat l'a fait, c'est regarder ces lois, avec ces trois lois, regarder aujourd'hui, c'est des affaires income tax, ça c'est un changement pour income tax, automatic exchange of financial account. Nous ne parlons pas de sous situation cela automatique exchange, mais ça il veut dire c'est côté gouvernement l'autre pays, particulièrement gouvernement l'Amérique qui a demandé pour information aux citoyens qui ont resté un pays avec et bien ces citoyens pays mais qui ont resté dans l'autre pays comme simple ici, ils ont demandé information à sous l'argent c'est mon salani à banque avec comme ça et ils ont demandé que le gouvernement s'est pour passer loi pour obliger bayo information ça là. So ça t'est passé pas tenir jet discussion à sous ça quand même, mais en finissement avant nous te point pause là, nous yo discuter ça nous a dit tourism authority, ça c'est loi pour anti-amendement pour bail autorité qui a managé les affaires touristes en simplicité plus pouvoir pour ranger les affaires secteur touriste là et aussi tourisme ça nous a dit tourism development et Shelton expliqué tout à l'heure c'était pour bail autorité tourisme pas particulièrement c'est mon qui a managé officiel là pas pour dire mot l'année mot qui yo regardé c'est peut-être yo paye mais ça qui est intéressant, bien intéressant qu'on dit pour qui façade opposition, chef façade opposition en Sénat là, je dis, ça c'est sénateur Titus Preville, il dit, la situation comme ça pas mérité dit paix. Mais il est obligé, il nie pour fait. Et ça a montré manière de façade là d'accord à son bail pour faire bagarre la marché. Et ça c'est bien intéressant. Après ça,
il y a un sénateur indépendant, il y a tout le monde. C'est un bon Charles. Il y a aussi dit, ça c'est un bail, il n'y a pas voulu garder plus fort dedans. Ça va donner un chat pour nous garder d'accord.
D'accord.
Mais toutes ces façades, ça n'a pas. C'est pas de ce gouvernement composition à nous changer l'idée sénateur indépendant.
Ça. Ok, so, nous dévirer, nous boutons sur ça, mais nous dévirer après-midi, nous avons discuté, ça c'est bill, ça fait électricité, changer, les semaines passées, nous avons fait changement en loi qui a gouverné les affaires électriques, nous avons regardé, l'année plusieurs autres, c'était citoyen, Saint-Lucie, terre, gouvernement, avec aussi les affaires, nous avons dit distribution of price and price of goods, ça c'est en marchandise avec bail comme ça.
Si par exemple longue année session nous trop, moi aussi voulais mener attention nous. You know, I would like to bring our attention on the St. Lucia Tourism Authority Amendment Bill. I think this is the one that had the most disagreement because I believe it was talking about the rules and the powers of the CEO of the St. Lucia Tourism Authority.
Correct.
And even to the fact where it was going to basically abolish the position of chief financial officer or financial controller. And it's like the opposition sides and even the independent senators were saying like they felt it was concentrating too much power in the hands of one person, which is the CEO of the Tourism Authority. And why remove an important position like chief financial officer and so on from that sort of thing, that the checks and balances maybe can be threatened. So it is something that maybe we'll be hearing more about it. Legislation is never static. It is a dynamic process, and there's nothing that says that next week or next month we may not come back here for an amendment to it arising out of the debates that have taken care of. And you know, it begins to inform a looking, but wait, maybe we need to take another. We are not saying it will be so, but seeing the manner in which some apprehensions, I might say, were expressed about it, not only from the opposition, but from the independents, it's possible that we have not heard the last of it. Yes.
Ok, merci Shelton. Et puis ça, nous avons dit merci un peu pour rester puis nous. Ça c'est le déjeuner à présent. Nous avons invité pour vier et puis nous avons dit à qui est Shelton?
Well, you on cas après des heures.
On cas après des heures.
2:15, yes.
Nous avons invité au souper, venir rester brancher et puis nous à l'est là. Nous avons plus à ce qui s'est passé en Sénat là, en Saint-Lucie, Georgia.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing further from the truth. Absolutely. So I resent that statement. I reject that statement. I don't accept it. But I'm going to say it to you. The Prime Minister and members on the other side can jump up and jump low, put any kind of pressure they want on me, whatever the threats they want to make, that's fine. But as long as I am sitting in this seat and representing the constituents of Micoud South, I will continue to speak and I will continue to hold this government accountable